What name are you bringing to the podcast and why? The No Shame in My Name podcast is a platform that celebrates and documents the stories behind names. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Music, and wherever you listen to your favourite podcasts. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at No Shame in My Name Pods.
Yeah, there was an element of freedom, like, there's a lot of steps in Machu Picchu. Obviously it's high up in the mountains, but someone was very excited to be able to walk down steps without pain. To experience walking down steps without pain. They didn't care that it was Machu Picchu, but they were just so excited that stairs were probably a problem.
Hello students and graduates. Welcome to PhD Lounge, the podcast of late night interviews where PhD students have a drink and talk about their research topics. I am your host Louisa, and happy year 2023, hoping that you have spent a lovely Christmas, New Year's Eve and first day of 2023 with your families and closest relatives. For the fourth time, while living, working and studying in Swansea since 2019, I spent Christmas, New Year's Eve and the first day of each year alone, even though I celebrated online with my parents and my brother. And besides that, I always find something to be creative and to be outside of home. Of course, when it is not raining, just like last year's Christmas, when I went cycling far from Swansea, where heavy rain started pouring and I got soaked when coming back home. Things I do to be creative are writing podcast scripts, playing classic Pokemon games, listening to Christmas jazz songs, and watching films and series on Streamio. When the weather is fine and sunny, however, I go walking, running or cycling. This Christmas, I celebrated it with my working colleagues from Nando's Swansea, which, by the way, for those who are listening to this session, Nando's is a restaurant chain in the UK where they serve grilled chicken and other whole food selection inspired in African Portuguese grilling style. And if you are not from the UK and if you have the opportunity to come to this country, make sure to list Nando's in your traveling dues and try to eat there, as you will be pleased with the food that they offer. Back to what I was saying. I was invited to have an afternoon lunch and dinner with some of my Nando's working colleagues, where we had a pajama social, watched some films and played some social games, which was fun and kind of a different Christmas party, as it was for me my second time I was enjoying Christmas with a group of friends that could not celebrating it with their parents and relatives. Therefore, I could say that those moments are some of a second family to you when, due to working reasons or even when you're studying an undergraduate, master's or PhD far from your home country, there is always a solution to spend Christmas, New Year's and any other special day you consider to yourself with your friends that are also spending those days alone. For me, it was a pleasure, even though I often miss being reconciled with my parents, divorced for 13 years, and my brother, to spend some time with them together. And so, being with your colleagues/friends, I think it has that special touch and care. So for those who could not enjoy Christmas, New Year's Eve and the 1st of January of the new year with your family and relatives, but with your friends, I hope that you had a wonderful time nevertheless. Anyway, welcome to 2023, hoping as well that you excelled yourself during the January exams, still continuing your PhD research after those lovely holidays, and lastly, all the best for the second term. and I welcome you as well to the first session of the PhD Lounge of this year, starting with a late-night interview with a third-year PhD student from Swansea University. This third-year PhD student studies tourism, but within a business management context, and has an interesting topic that, who knows, might be the future of these two subjects. And it is about the use of virtual reality or VR technology for people with limited physical mobilities. The work of this student is to teach and engage people with disabilities to experience different touristic landscapes with the use of VR, and how it can be a beneficial technological tool for the tourism business. And throughout the research, the student had talked about the reactions of each participant and the landscapes that were used, in this case, Kenya and Borneo, which you will know about during the session. So therefore, have a seat, grab your drinks, and let's welcome my PhD guest, Louisa Hardwick. Hi, Louisa. Welcome to the PhD Lounge podcast, and thank you for being my guest and for sharing a research topic that is enlightening, and probably it might be the future of VR for people in general, and especially for tourism and business management.
Fingers crossed.
So, could you tell us briefly about your academic journey before venturing into the PhD?
So I actually, over 10 years ago now, I did my undergrad, and then decided to travel about for a bit, basically. So I spent the next 10 years traveling. And then about 2019, I was like, oh, let's get serious about life for a second then. Came back and did my master's in Swansea. And then they asked me to stay on for a PhD. So I thought, well, yeah. And it happened during COVID. So I was like, well, I'm not going anywhere. So I might as well. And that's accidental the entire.
All right. So where did you take the undergraduate and the master's? All in Swansea or not?
No, my undergraduate was actually in Aberystwyth University.
Oh, okay. So it's a bit far from Swansea then.
Yeah, further up north.
Up north. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then, and was it business management, tourism, or something related?
It started out as business management and tourism, so It was always going to be tourism specific. Except they were doing a trip where they were going to go to Nepal and hike around Nepal, but I'm disabled myself, so I couldn't actually take part, which meant I had to change to business management.
Oh.
And yeah, now the PhD is under business and management because they don't have a tourism PhD.
Oh, I see. That is so interesting. And also, was it also because you said you're disabled, right? So is it, what sort of disability do you possess? And does that affect it as well? Does that influence for you striving into the PhD, and also specifically for the research you're undertaking?
Well, it was definitely influential in how I picked my topic, yeah. But I can't put weight on my knee, basically. There's muscle damage all around that just doesn't heal.
Ooh.
So I can't spend more than about 3 hours standing up at a time. Yeah, and things like that. And I'll just buckle and it's just pain constantly. So it's like a chronic pain thing. Yeah.
Oh, right. I cannot imagine how it must be so painful. Yet, I can perceive that we all treated equally, and everyone can take a PhD, whether it has disabilities or No, or not?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, it did stop me from getting the masters, didn't it? In the kind of area I wanted to. So that was very frustrating. But that I can do a PhD in it is pretty good.
Okay, all right. So you've told me before we started the recording, you told me that you were keen in the using of virtual reality, and specifically for this framework in tourism and business management, which is gaining popularity. To be fair, why VR? What did spark into you to do this?
I am an adventure traveller, so it's about virtual reality and limited mobilities in adventure tourism, and I love adventure tourism. Like, if my body allows me, I will hike across countries. I will throw myself, bungee jump off buildings. I'll do whatever. I'm really an adrenaline junkie. I'm limited by my body, and I am not technical in any way, but I have a PS5. And,
okay.
And I was doing something on there, and it mentioned VR bungee jumping or skydiving. So I then thought, well, wouldn't that be interesting? People more disabled than I am, because I'm still quite capable. Would it be interesting to see if we could take them to adventure tourism, which is quite, if you don't have an able body, it's very limited. You can't do much of it. So could we do it on VR instead? So my little love of gaming met my love of adventure tourism in the middle.
So it's so interesting. So from a gaming perspective, and that what it gained interest into you in moving forward, but then trying to transfer that into a different framework, but also to promote equality between people and those also with disability, I assume, from what you've said to me.
Yeah, basically, just to make things much more accessible, but maybe not in the way that we think it might be. In VR instead of actually, accessibility in a different way, maybe.
I can see as well, because nowadays the VR, as I could say from the past, the things that when I was a child and also a teenager, the sense of VR that me, you, and many others who are living this generation of the PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo Wii, experienced VR. I remember experiencing VR, but not VR per se, but I don't know if you have remembered the iToy camera was for PS2, and throughout I was able also to get the PlayStation Move for PS3, so that was another one, and experienced Nintendo Wii, not just to promote physical activity by playing video games, and which was quite fun actually. And I wonder how did that influence as well people with disability to being active while playing their favorite video games.
I know it would be hard to do. It's quite sedentary by design, isn't it? You've got gaming chairs and you've got all this lot. So it would be interesting maybe to use VR to help people get fit in a more fun way. And there's, on the VR itself, there's lots of virtual reality workouts, like that called Beat Saber,
sure,
where you throw swords to a beat and things like that. So there was a lot of kind of adrenaline stuff on there already. So it would be nice to just kind of bring it back and say, okay, let's do a calm one, calm adventure maybe. So we went around Machu Picchu.
Oh, that's so lovely. It's to getting fit, but also for research purposes. For now with the PhD and all of that.
Yeah.
So, what was your first reaction when you tried VR for the first time using the goggles headset?
Oh, I was really actually very impressed. I was actually really stupid in that I played a horror game first. And I was absolutely terrified. I think it was, it was like an escape room, but a horror-themed version. So, yeah, sure. And I was absolutely terrified. I had to take it off and go have a cup of tea.
What was the name of the game?
It was called The Room VR.
the Room VR.
Yeah, it was really, really good, and I'd recommend it if you do have the Oculus head system. But I was terrified, so it sparked a very real reaction.
It's a quite recent game, I think. Not even 10 years old, I assume that would have, because I think VR has been, well, taking apart the PlayStation Move on PS3 and the iToy. I think the VR has been ever since the PlayStation 4 came in almost 10 years ago, because I remember seeing that in different stores where people would try virtual reality, and then when the PS5 came out almost 2 years and a half ago, then the virtual reality market became a reality.
Yeah, it's starting to boom a lot more. So it started in 2010 because I've done the Oculus, because you've got PlayStation VR, which attaches to the PlayStation,
yes,
which is quite old now. Mm-hmm. And then I've got, and then there was the Oculus attached to a computer. But when I was starting my VR, kind of look around, see what I wanted, the Oculus Quest 2 had just come out, and it didn't need any computer to run it. The headset was the computer.
Sure.
So it just needed the headset and the controllers, meaning it was much more accessible for my participants. So it's come on in leaps and bounds. It doesn't feel that way sometimes. 10 years feels like a long time, but it's not really. It's not that long at all, but yeah. For technology anyway, but it came on in leaps and bounds.
It's quite interesting. I guess VR is to stay, and since we are advancing so much in technologically, who knows that the VR, when it goes to the 6th generation, who knows that the reaction and also the stimulus, but also the accessibility and adaptability will also link with the necessities of many people who has disabilities, and not just saying physical disabilities, but also people when they, for example, they warn people with epilepsy, right? And to avoid if they can't stay for long hours, they might just having a break for epilepsy danger.
Well, it's being used in rehabilitation, physical rehabilitation now, so there's a lot of medical uses coming forward for VR now, but it's still a long way to go. A big theme for one, because I'm in the analysis stage of my PhD now, so a lot of work heading my way, but one of the biggest themes is that the VR was not adaptable. It wasn't made for them, basically, and they were very frustrated with the technology, because they were all in wheelchairs, basically, or they all had to sit down for it, and the VR is made for people who can stand up for periods of time.
Right.
So,
right. I remember hearing that, saying that when they were showing VR in the gaming stores, most of the people were just people who could stand up, because it's just you could walk around and all, and well, that even for me, I tried VR not many years ago for the first time, virtual reality on using the Oculus headset and all that. For me, it was quite confusing, but a fun experience. But now seeing on the other side, when you're telling me that it was just only for a certain percentage of people, then it takes a little more time to trying to make it more adaptable and accessible.
Yeah, I think it's for a certain demographic currently, maybe, and it's just, or they just haven't thought about people with disabilities using the equipment. So, I don't know, unless they start thinking about it. But I don't know, I'll see what I can do with my research afterwards.
Oh, well. And now going into the research, so how did you introduce VR for your project and for your supervisor, and mainly for your volunteers? We're not going to say here the names, obviously, to stay anonymous. But how did you introduce to these three entities?
I was really quite lucky with my supervisor in that she actually asked me to apply for the PhD. And we came up with the kind of, because I had to do the proposal and do the whole thing, and she helped me come up with that. And then when I mentioned virtual reality, she was like, yes, there's a huge gap in the research for that, so that would be absolutely perfect. So that was amazing.
Wow.
so my participants, I actually recruited via like posters and emails and things like that. And most people were so interested that I didn't actually have any trouble recruiting. They were just really excited to try the virtual reality. So like I know I was absolutely terrified I was going to have to extend by a year or do something like that. But no, the moment I got about 4 people and then it just snowballed. So I had absolutely no trouble recruiting because people were so excited for virtual reality already. That was the biggest draw.
So it was more easier than you expected.
Yes, I expected to struggle. Mind you, you hear horror stories about recruitment, don't you, and things like that. So I was just going, oh my god, I don't want to have to extend. I'm self-funded. I can't, and panicking over nothing. I did it all in about 6 months.
Well, it was quite easier. It was quite easier then, as you said.
Yeah.
So that means you beat COVID.
Yes. Well, I started. My timeline's a bit. So 2020 was when I finished my masters. Didn't actually get my graduation ceremony until last year, but and then straight into 2021. So yeah, 2 years ago, January. I'm January influx, and then yeah. So COVID was basically over, and it wasn't until last year that I was even doing data collection. So thankfully, I missed it completely.
So then, once you got accepted, your proposal got accepted, and you got into the PhD. Then which locations around Swansea or Wales in general you consider to get your volunteers informed and to willingly participate in your project?
So I am actually based in Carmarthen. It's about an hour outside of Swansea. I commute. And so what I did was I applied to local groups in the area of like Pembrokeshire, Carmarthenshire, Swansea. So I had quite the spectrum. And there was things like People First, Pembrokeshire. I went for veterans, soldier veterans, and pain clinics, things like that. So I had about 3 counties I could pick from because I'm slap bang in the middle of both. So I had a bit of a pool.
And
luckily people were interested. And then I had a pain clinic. 1 person came in, and then they said, "Oh, I'll tell the others." And then from that clinic, I had 4 people. So like it just snowballed.
So you probably had plenty of participants in a few...
Yeah, well, I had more participants than I actually needed, which I think is a very rare place for a...
What was the limit you needed?
So because I'm doing IPA, which is interpretive phenomenological analysis, it is an extremely analysis-heavy type of... It's to do with experience, basically. It's about the layers of a person's individual experience. So because it's so huge in the data that you need to go really, really deep. I only needed about 10. So and I ended up with about 13, which is more data than I can handle right now. I'm finding out, but...
Was it still acceptable with 13 individuals?
Yes, they were like, "You've put too much work on yourself, actually." Because I actually have 3 supervisors. And they were all like, "You've done something stupid here."
Oh, so was divided between you had like
they were so happy I had them. They were like, "Oh, you've given yourself too much work."
Which physical disabilities they present?
We had a range. Yeah, so it was all limited mobilities.
Sure.
So it was all to do with the body, but it was all limited mobilities from kind of the waist downwards. So with the veterans, there was a lot of quite traumatic wounds, actually. I had a person with no leg. Nice. There was someone with no foot from diabetes. 4 people from pain clinic. So they were just in chronic pain constantly. They just couldn't move more than a couple of feet without being in pain. For no reason, their body was just sending pain signals. And I had an older couple who had like osteonecrosis. They were 87, mind. So I had those. Yeah, lots of different things. And a lot of it was actually sudden. Like one was just running a marathon and then suddenly couldn't walk the next day, and that was it. Paralysed for the rest. And I was just sitting there going, I'm so grateful for like the fact that I can move. This is...
Sure.
Yeah.
So, and then you told me that for your experiments you used touristic sites. Could you tell which ones was it, and how were their reaction when they announced them? When you announced the sightseeings?
Well, in the pilot study, there were 3 options. So it was Kenya, Borneo, and Machu Picchu. And from the pilot study, I was able to kind of narrow it down to something that would be a bit more useful to my research project, so that we could have I could study the same reactions from people, or the reactions to the same thing.
Sure.
So I had to focus it on Machu Picchu because it was much more interactive and everything like that. And some people were really excited to go, and some people didn't really care about Machu Picchu, but they were just there for the virtual reality kind of nature of it.
Not for the touristic site itself.
No, most people didn't actually care about that. They were just there for the tech. Like, virtual reality is expensive. So I think at least half of them were like, all right, well, I want to kind of buy it, but if I don't like it. So they were seeing this as a free run, basically a free trial.
Okay. Sounds interesting. And how then you introduced them to VR? Did you had any training before the case studies you've done, or did you say jump straight into it?
I did interview training because, well, I'd never interviewed before. My dissertation didn't have human participants for my master's, so this was the first time I'd ever interviewed someone, so I made sure to get interview training. But as for the VR, I basically just put it on them so that they were comfortable, because obviously you have to adjust it to you, and then I just let them go, and you can cast onto your phone, so I could see what they were seeing, so that if they had any questions, I could answer them by looking through it. And I had to make sure that I was, good at the VR, that I knew what I was doing.
Oh my! So sounds interesting. They got hooked.
Well, some did. I think some went out and bought it, and I'm like, I should be getting a commission from this. I'm just saying. But some didn't like it because of how inaccessible it was to them.
All right. So yeah, it's another thing. Just promoting both equality for disabled people, but as well introducing VR to some. It was something maybe for them. Something galactical to say the least, and I can imagine how much happy they were, because were some of those volunteers that you interacted with them, as many of them traveled overseas or not?
So the ones that had been disabled for a long time obviously had not traveled. It's so difficult when you're disabled to travel anywhere, because not even hotels you can really use. So everything has to be adapted, and it's just, people just don't. So a lot of them hadn't, and they were quite excited to be able to see places that they would never get to see. But on the flip side, it actually made them upset, because it was like showing them what they could have won if they weren't disabled. Like, oh, here's what you could have seen for real if you weren't disabled. So it was, exciting for them, but also quite sad. I got a lot of emotional response.
So lots of emotional response then. And since speaking about emotional reactions, then what did they experience while using the Oculus?
So, well, generally a lot of excitement, but it wasn't the Oculus that made them emotional. It was the interview afterwards, because I was asking them, how was that for you? How did you feel? And then I had one girl, bless her, we had to take a break during the interview. I actually had to take a break for most of them because they got emotional. And one of them was, she was the one who'd been running a marathon and then found out she would never be able to walk again. Like, she went from being someone so fit and healthy and thinking she had all the time in the world to do this travel, to being told the next day that no, you're not going to be able to do this again. So she got really upset because she feels like she's lost independence. And whilst the virtual reality gave that back to her in some way, it also reminded her that she did not have it.
So we could say in that moment, when they were experiencing Kenya, Borneo, and Machu Picchu, their emotions arisen, and saying that, okay, that would be the first and last time ever that I'm going to experience this. Because then, so that in their minds would be, I have freedom now in that space, so in that spatial time.
Yeah, there was an element of freedom. Like, there's a lot of steps in Machu Picchu. Obviously, it's high up in the mountains, but someone was very excited to be able to walk down steps without pain. to experience walking down steps without pain. They didn't care that it was Machu Picchu, but they were just so excited that stairs would not be a problem.
So it must have been hard for them to using the controllers of the VR controllers.
Yeah.
So they use that for the Machu Picchu, for example. They use them to climb them. So they had any sort of tiredness,
Joysticks.
Resilience.
Yeah, not in the hands so much. So the people, because I did have a number of people who were gamers, they got it really instinctively. You know, if you're playing the PlayStation, you're used to controllers. So those who had played the PlayStation were really quite skilled with it. But then you've got the older generation and things like that who had never played and they couldn't stand it. They just could not get the controllers at all. So trying to move around with a joystick left and right, they just couldn't do it. So it was quite frustrating for them. There was a lot of range of emotions going on. They were excited at the experience, but frustrated at the controllers, and the headset's really heavy. And then the experience that you had to take a picture and you had to get the camera from your hip. But when you're sitting down in a wheelchair, you don't actually have a hip. You know, it's not there. So they couldn't access some of the experience.
So they found a hard time to adapt themselves to the Oculus because and that's
so instead of the Oculus adapting to them, they had to try and adapt to the Oculus.
And it's quite logical because and then as we were speaking before, that the Oculus was made for the people to stand that were able to standing up and not for the disabled people. And there's also that lack of adaptation to the heads and also the hands of people, because each touch and shape of any head and hand, it's different. But the problem is because it is so the VR system, the headset is made through is a standard production.
Yeah.
And that would be tremendously difficult to spend, and they would spend millions and millions dollars, pounds, whatever, in adapting to each individual's head. Yeah.
From a business point of view, it doesn't make sense to adapt. It really doesn't. And I think there was somebody whose business was actually to adapt things, and they were like, I understand why they're not doing it, but you cannot help but feel their absolute frustration when they can't. They are banned from something that is deemed quite normal.
Of course.
You know? Like, it seems like it's accessible because it's just on your head and your hands. But it's not. Feels like it's been taken away.
No, that thing has logic. I mean, the first time that I experienced, in my case, even though I'm not a disabled person, I don't know when I will be disabled. So, but for the first time when I experienced VR, one of the things that stood me up, that started to give me pain, was around here, because because the bones of my forehead are large, they're quite accentuated, and not even the cushion of the Oculus eased my pain. So after having the experience, it was 5 minutes that I had that experience. It hurt me a lot.
Yeah. So there's a way to go for people who aren't disabled as well, I think, when it comes to VR. The technology will get there eventually, I think. They just need to keep pushing for it. But have you ever played Assassin's Creed?
Yes, I've played.
Yeah, so the Animus, that actually came up a lot among the gamers.
Sure.
That's virtual reality.
It is indeed. It is.
Yeah. And it's just something that you lay in, isn't it? And you control with your mind.
Sure.
Basically. And I had a lot of people going, I want that virtual reality. And I'm like, well, that's currently just in a game, but I'm sure that might be the end game. We don't know.
No, we don't know. And probably it might be even the future. As we were speaking before, it's coming to become virtual reality is increasingly popular. Probably will replace remote controls of the PlayStation and Xbox. Who knows? And
the more something becomes popular, the more you use it,
sure,
the cheaper it becomes to develop. Mm-hmm. So then, eventually, it's going to be 30 years' time, and kids and grandkids are going to be learning on virtual reality in schools, I'm sure.
Sure, and I think as well, and probably with the influence of the technology, that the children in certain schools are not being able on how to write, and I wonder if that will influence people with disability as well.
Just a keyboard, maybe, yeah. Oh, yeah, I suppose you wouldn't even need the keyboard, because some of the VR does work by voice recognition. I know I haven't got it off, I don't trust it, a bit paranoid, but my PS5 will wake up if you say, wake up PS5, so it's voice controlled already. Yeah, something like that. I'm not sure, I turned that off because I don't want it listening to me.
Oh well, so since this is becoming a futuristic tool and also beneficial for tourism and people with disability in general, we were talking about some of the things that are still to be yet developed, such as being adaptable to each head's individual, for people with disability, and also the downside of seeing that as a business perspective of standardizing the VR Oculus. Do you think there is still much work to do from a business point of view, but also from the tourism, because this also might move with the psychology of people with disability?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work needs to be done with VR, but I'm confident that it will get there in my lifetime. Things are just developing so fast that there's hope at the end of the tunnel for me. For physiotherapy, I might one day be able to walk again without pain. But for those who, maybe by the time that happens, VR will be better and I needn't have worried.
Of course, no, because it's been incredible. Because I remember, because since we're speaking disability, you remind me some of the answers that when you answered to me and we were talking, because that reminds me one of my first guests here at the PhD Lounge podcast was also a PhD student in Swansea University, Felicity McKee, that is taking also history, disability in the 19th century, and she was talking about the future of disability in the whole world, and she told me that there are a lot of people that in the future, when they get 50, 60, or even earlier that stage, that they will present signs of disability that for now we do not recognize it for now. And one of the statistics that I saw earlier today was one website called worldbank.org, and they tell us that around 80%, which equals to 1 billion of people, have a disability, whether it's physical, psychological, neurological, whatever. And probably the use of the VR, as we were discussing here, may even be a medicinal solution as well for that aspect, in case of if people cannot go to certain countries because of that disability, then they have the VR to experience it. And who knows, not just the VR, but expanding it into a simulation room with 3D.
Have you ever seen Star Trek?
I've seen Star Trek, yes.
Have you seen the 70s now, so it's called The Next Generation, and they have something on it called the holodeck.
Yes.
Yeah, so that room style thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually, funny enough, I was doing analysis on that today specifically, and that is, it's a room, and what VR is missing that people have found is that with tourism you experience all of the five senses. There's smell, there's touch, VR only has audio-visual.
Sure.
So people found that, especially the people who have travelled much more, they were like, well, actually this is missing. Like, for me, New York is the smell of hot dogs.
Sure.
And when I go, like, Mallorca is the smell of sun cream. So they associate smells with travel. So the VR doesn't provide that. So until you get to a stage where the holodeck or even the Animus or something that we actually only see in media happens, it's never going to be what people actually want it to be. So I don't think it can go far enough for travel. I think it'll be a good way to maybe pre-experience something. So like, say you are disabled, you can look at a hotel and be like, okay, no, this ramp is wide enough. You know, you can maybe double check areas, but when it comes to travel experiences, I'm not sure until you get to the future, like the real futuristic stuff, the real video game sci-fi stuff, it's not actually going to be any good for it.
No, so the only thing that we just have to do is just wait and see any solution that can be practical and also beneficial for the worldwide population. So I can take a guess that for the next 20 years, that might be something new in regards to the percentage of people that has a disability.
We're aging as a population as well. Like, we're getting older and older, and there's constantly age-related disabilities. People assume that they aren't disabilities. So like arthritis.
Sure.
That's a disability. But people don't class it as it because you're old. That's what it is.
That's a disability.
So we do have a lot more disabilities than people will declare. So I think that the 1 billion is probably a lot higher because most people won't even say they're disabled when they are.
Sure. So probably this statistics present disability, but they might count just only with the physical disability movements.
Yeah. So like I also have ADD. My attention is just, but that's counted as a mental disability. But a lot of people won't count it.
Mm-hmm.
So because when you're doing those statistics, you can only get people who count themselves. You only have people's words for the statistics. So if you've got tons of people who are disabled but don't know that they are because there's just not enough knowledge about it, then I think those statistics are actually much lower than what reality is.
Yes, and I agree with you. And one of the things that also could be helpful, although has been some sort of political issues about that, and I don't want it to extend from that, is that this idea of Bill Gates trying to invest on a chip where can it to be inserted inside our bodies and to relate what we have, what we need to take, what medicine do we have to use when we are ill, or if we have any disability, what should we do, what they can contact. It's quite science fiction from that context, but I think it will turn to be a reality, and many people have been criticizing that it was like an attempt to attacking freedom per se, but I don't want to prolong onto that, and I think that will be a reality within 20 years, and the use of VR for that could also be something adjoining to that chip.
It'd be good to help you visualize. So sometimes if you've got a little chip that says, oh, you have, let's say, cystic fibrosis, but like just saying that isn't going to help you. And I find that VR is really good visually in that it can definitely help you visualize, whatever that actually means. Being told you're this doesn't always relate to understanding, so I think VR might be able to help with something like that at least.
No, I'm sure. And also with the VR and the chip that Bill Gates is trying to develop and futuristically will be invested by the multimillionaires, I think.
Yeah.
we cannot say much longer in what the future holds. But
it's developing in such different ways. You don't know what's going to come next or how fast something's going to develop. Like nuclear fusion, they've done a successful. I'm amazed at that, nuclear fusion. And if that is going to become in my lifetime, that's going to be intense. It's going to change everything, all the way down to virtual reality.
Oh well, we just have to wait and see what the future holds.
Yeah.
During your research, did you have a volunteer that excited you the most?
Yes, I did. There was this. It's funny. It ties in with the future. This 87-year-old, and he was. I know he was so small. I'm 5'2", and he was like to my shoulder. He was tiny, and I really, really liked him because he was so enthusiastic, and he was saying how the world must go forward without me because I'm 87. But if this is what the future is going to be like, then that's amazing. I'm happy for the future to go forward without me. And he was just so infused, not by the VR or what his experience actually was. He didn't care about Machu Picchu. He did it because his daughter had done it. So it was like that snowball thing. And he was just so happy with what was coming next, what the VR represented more than what the VR actually was. And it was just so infectious.
So he didn't identify himself with the VR, or did he, to some extent?
No, he said he's not going to be a VR user. This isn't something he's ever going to do again. And he loved having a new experience. I mean, when you're 87, you've experienced a lot. So he was absolutely thrilled just to have this brand new experience, and just his pure joy, was just amazing to be around. And he was telling me about how excited he was about, he's got this grandkid that he was like, if my grandkid might learn,
Sure.
might be in a school with this, might get to go to places I've never been without ever stepping out of his home. And that's just so, amazing. And I was just there going, yeah, it is. It's amazing. You're so right.
So it was more about what he spoke, what he has written for the interview, and his excitement for the VR, not just the material, but just hearing. Was it the first time he heard those initials VR?
So because I had an information sheet and I sent it to him, and he was just asking me all these questions. He was so curious in the email, and then he was just so excited to do it. And then he did it, and he was thrilled. He actually did love the experience. He was like, "Oh, I never thought I'd see something like that," and he was so present and excited the entire time, from beginning to end. It was great.
I wish I could meet him someday.
I wish everyone could meet him. He was so great. It was sad to think he was he was just thinking he wasn't going to make the year. He was quite old, and he had osteonecrosis, so it's not arthritis, but his bones are literally dying off. So he's saying how he might not make the year, and he's so happy to have had this experience because now he's confident that he can leave the planet knowing that the future is going to be great. And so I just loved that. But I was sad about it because I was like, no, I've just met you and I don't want to even think about you dying. But yeah.
It sounded like an anthropological interaction then.
It was mutually beneficial. It was great. I was emotional, he was emotional, but he was just so thrilled with it, and I loved it. He was definitely my favorite.
Did you have any other least favorites? So I dare to say, to ask.
I did have one who, she was quite combative.
Oh.
She had high anxiety, and so anytime I asked her to expand on something, she just assumed that her answer wasn't good enough, and she was like, why isn't it good enough? And I'm like, no, it's fine, I just need to go a bit deeper into the answer, I'm sorry. I felt like I was really on edge, but mostly they were really, really good.
So in the end, all the investigation, all the case studies you've did throughout your research were positive overall.
Yes. Overall, yeah, positive experiences, positive reactions, and most people, though, were not excited about virtual reality as it is now, but as it will be.
And you see, since you haven't finished your PhD yet, what did you learn throughout those experiences you had?
A lot. So much. Just about research in general, about interviewing in general, just tons of skills, but also the outcomes. So it's basically virtual reality is not adaptable. It is not accessible. It does advertise itself as such, so it's false advertising. But there is so much potential in it. It's unholy. It's not where it... A lot of them were influenced by the media that they've seen. So the Star Trek, Assassin's Creed came up. Have you ever seen the film Ready Player One?
Yes, I've seen the films, I've played the games, I've read the books.
So all of the media, all of them had also done the same, and this is where they thought virtual reality was. they were like, oh, but then they were like, oh wait, no, these films, things are set in the future. Why would it be here? Why did I expect that? But because they're surrounded by that media, that's what they expected. So they're not so excited about what it is now because they expected the future. If that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense. It does make sense, especially when you're speaking about Star Trek. When we imagine even a film called 2021 was made during the 80s, I think.
Yeah.
Was expecting, oh, we're going to see aliens and all of that. All of them are green, just like they're doing the gaming simulation.
Yeah.
And also they have those big eyes that imagining VR in that sense. And now 30, 40 years, almost 50, all they imagined, they made it a reality.
Yeah. So science fiction is very often a precursor to science fact.
Yes.
So, like, I think Star Trek had flip phones.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I
Star Trek
totally
had flip
agree.
phones before flip phones were a thing. They had Bluetooth. They had automatic doors. Like, pretty much prophetic wisdom coming from Star Trek. So, hopefully that follows, that tracks, yeah.
Hopefully the Star Trek legacy
lives on.
Shall go on.
Yeah, I hope so. I love Star Trek.
So, well, as we are approaching to the end of our session, in general, what are your thoughts on doing a PhD, and what advice do you have for the students who are listening to this session?
So I love my PhD. I'm still enjoying my time, and part of me wonders if that's because I'm self-funded and the project is so close to my heart. But I am actually working 3 jobs as well as the PhD. I'm doing the TA. As I'm self-funded, I work in retail to fund it, and I'm a research assistant. So I find it really, really tricky to balance my time. And I don't stress out. I don't think... A lot of people tell me how they're having breakdowns and stuff, and I'm just sitting there going, why? Like...
Exactly. And it's when we meet the undergraduates and when we work with them, when they ask... I don't know if you had that personal experience that I also had. You're taking a PhD, and it's automatic, unconsciously they say, "Oh, that's too much time," without realizing that the undergraduate is also 3 years or 4 years. Same goes for the PhD. I think the psychological thing around that, when we advise to do a PhD, the trick is, I'm so independent that I don't have lectures and I don't feel motivated. But that's the issue of the PhD, is not having lectures, is being yourself, your own lecturer, and give yourself your own class, which is the research, writing the thesis.
Well, so the way I say it is, I say that I have to be my own zookeeper.
Sure.
So my PhD is the zoo, and I have to get it fed, watered. I have to do that for myself. So I have to be my own zookeeper. You know, I have to give myself enrichment, you know, because I rock climb outside of this. It really helps for the knee, like a physical therapy type thing. And and I have to factor in my physiotherapy as well. So I'm always getting exercise. So I am my own zookeeper. So it makes sense to kind of externalize it a little bit. Yeah,
sure.
Time management is always
absolutely. Time management is the key, and I add as well, consistency is also key for PhD students.
Consistency and persistence. Because I also run on an energy schedule. Like, if I'm like, right, I'm going to do PhD work, but I'm so low on energy, I'm just going to stare at a screen and not do anything, because I'm just there like, okay, guess I have to do work now. Nothing's going to be done, and the work is not going to be any good. So when I have that kind of low energy, I've actually set aside like the niggly bits of the PhD. So like getting your references correctly referenced, you know, finding the papers and putting them aside, reading them, but anything that requires a low energy. So when I have high energy, that's when I do my analysis and my writing. So it's time management and energy management, I think, for me.
Absolutely.
Especially
absolutely. No, there's not right or wrong. Everyone has his point
Maybe
of view
don't have
of
as many
doing
jobs
the
as I
PhD,
do.
and I think the more advice we give to undergraduates and trying to motivate them to go forward, I think the better. Because as we were speaking as well about the future of VR, we can also say about the future of the future of university education. More and more businesses and also the teaching system are not just requesting graduation. They are now requesting the MA, and within a few years, which is also slowly disappearing, they'll only request PhDs. And who knows, in the future, postdocs. So we must be updated, whatever the costs.
Well, it's like I was saying about technology. Unfortunately, it goes the other way. The more popular the bachelor is, then the more people are going to want the masters because it's common.
The more demanding will be.
Yes. So it's like America. Have you ever been to America, like US?
No.
So the education system there, it's batshit crazy. I used to live in California, and the student fees are ridiculous and the student finance is awful, but they are like that already. You must have the masters before you can even go into something that's considered an entry-level job. Yeah, so I think we're getting... I don't agree with it, but I think that's what's happening in Britain too.
Well, I don't say no more. So, from that, you told me and totally understand. And I believe for those who are listening, will also, through time, will understand. So, to end the session, to know more about your research and your passion that you have said multiple times here throughout the interview, where do the listeners can follow you? If you have social media for more information or any other resources that you would love to share, so that any student could be in touch with you.
Okay, so I really only have I have a Twitter. I'm very, very bad at social media. Like, I only got a Twitter recently. I don't even know my username. That's how bad I am. I don't have an Instagram. I do have a private Instagram that's not for research purposes. So I can give you my Twitter handle is Louisa Hardwick. I'm always doing. It's mostly tourism based, I'll be honest, but there's a lot of virtual reality involved, of course, because the Aven Institute with Swansea, they're virtual reality based. And sometimes I work with them in development of things. So, yeah, but as for social media, that's really it, unless people want to see my travels on Instagram, but that's it.
And they can also see a bit of your research. You share a bit?
Instagram, just on Twitter. My Instagram's personal, but basically, like I said, I travelled for 10 years and I can't stop. I still go. Every 3 months I'm off somewhere stupid. Like, I think, and all of the conferences for tourism, they're all everywhere. So in the last year I've been to Jordan, I was in Menorca for a conference, South America, and now I'm in Montreal this year. Tourism conferences are insane. Expensive, insane.
I can't imagine how it must be so motivating for you.
No, well, especially because our allowance is only $7.50, and I'm like, I have to travel to Canada on that. How's that going to work? But all right, we'll figure it out.
Oh, well, Louisa, thank you so much for this interview. I believe I've learned a bit more about VR and how VR should be put into practice for disabled people and seeing what the future holds for VR. But also, I enjoyed so much having this conversation with you. So thank you for reaching me and to being part of the PhD Lounge. And I wish you all the best to finish the research so that you can travel even more and see what the future holds. And when the thesis becomes published, then I'm keen to read it and see how and to have a perspective about it. So I will thank you very much.
Buy you a coffee if you can get through that behemoth.
Thank you very much, Louisa. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
And this is where I end this late night interview with Louisa Hardwick. Personally, my talk with Louisa gave me more information about the use of VR from tourism and business perspectives, and also learned something about the goods and the bads of VR in adapting it to people with disabilities. But nevertheless, those individuals with limited mobility Louisa had interviewed had in general a positive experience when interacting with the Oculus headset while they explored virtually Kenya, Borneo and Machu Picchu. A big thank you to Louisa for sharing her PhD experience and background that led to her research, and also to all the listeners that had time to hear this late night interview. If you want to know more about her research, then make sure to reach her Twitter at Louisa B. Hardwick, and she will be pleased to share more things about research and her advice about doing a PhD. This session is coming soon, and so more late night interviews are also coming. But the next session will be the continuation of the PhD Iceberg Explained series, so stay tuned for it. In the meantime, if you are enjoying PhD Lounge podcast, then please leave your feedback or a review to help the PhD Lounge outreach many listeners and PhD students who would like to share their PhD experience. You can leave your feedback or review at my new website, phdlounge.co.uk, which was made by Natalie Jarvis, a PhD student based in Swansea University studying business management. And also, feel free to check on the social media: Facebook, PhD Pod Lounge, Instagram, PhD LMF, and Twitter at PhD Loungecast. Thank you all for tuning in. It has been a pleasure.